A pleasure to me all at last. And now, we are back at it once again with more HJN Season 5. And as I mentioned before, when I talked a bit about pixels, I feel like I was going to have to talk a bit about certain other video games that existed back in the day that were quite popular, mainly because of the implementation of pixels as a whole. Because after all, television and movies are all put together. They utilized a similar system, utilizing pixels and utilizing the reels, which of course were film, so to speak. But in comparison though, the cartridges that supplied pixels to the TV screens in the 70s and 80s, there were plenty of games out there that might as well be talked about here, as a few worthy examples of how they used pixels at their best. So, what better way to start off than something that I have talked about before, known as Tetris. And when I have talked about Tetris before, well, here's the thing though. Alexei Pajitnov, a Russian programmer at the time in the 1980s, was famously known for a certain tetromino-based game, which was mainly a puzzle-solving game, complete with some unique speed changes that would happen every now and then for the more points that you rack up. And not to mention the unique shape and color of these objects known as tetrominos, basically unique blocks that would typically be formed with 4 squares, whether they be in an L shape or a T shape or a Z shape. It doesn't entirely matter all that much here because the end result was by far one of the best known puzzle games of all time. And as I have discussed before, there was a movie based off of Tetris in 2023 starring the one and only Taron Egerton. There was also a large collection of different games over the years simply called Tetris Forever. And when I got the chance to play that several months ago, it was pretty much astounding with the likes of how the men behind the companies were all putting them together. I mean, you had Alexei with his part in the Tetris pioneering as well as the release and popularity over time, and then you had the head of Bulletproof Software. Hank was in fact as much of a determined man, despite being born Dutch, living in the United States, and in Japan for the most part. He sure was as determined to get Tetris out of there in Russia as soon as possible. Because let's face it, there's always going to be a number of problems out there. But the big escape that allowed for a certain communist nation to at least flee from the idea of communism, Tetris was, in fact, one of the only big leading examples of puzzle-based games at the time. Whether it be released on consoles, or portable consoles, or PC, some might have their debate on which is better. But what I can at least agree on is just the fact that Tetris has grown to be one of the biggest franchises out there. There's been a lot of variations, a lot of iterations, some modded versions of Tetris, some wacky, tuned out, ridiculous forms of Tetris. But everybody knows about the classic, one that started it off, where they weren't really squares, but they were basically parentheses just put together to resemble the tetrominos. That was kind of how it worked back then, before they eventually figured out how to make squares. Still, a lot of us can agree, the popularity of Tetris could never possibly get any bigger. Not only because of the movie, but also because of what Tetris Forever seemed to show us. A ton of interviews came down between Hank Rogers and Alexei Pajitnov, and even more so when you get to know about the many iterations of Tetris they were able to create together, whether it be from the likes of Bulletproof Software or Atari or Nintendo, and even Sega was able to join in on the action. But, as most of us will agree on it sure has lived up to be one of the most unique pieces of puzzle-based entertainment of all time. And it was all because the dastardly, somewhat unlikely friendship between the US and the Soviet Union. Some might think that it was part of the reason for why Russia would eventually end the point of communism, and the Cold War itself would eventually cease by 1991. Still, though, after all these years, many still praise Tetris for what it is. More than just a game. A way of life. I feel like that wraps things up here, though. So, what I will say is that there will be a few other games I'll have picked out for us. So, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side for more.